Thanks for joining. Find your most relaxing position, take a slow breath in, and let's begin our very quiet stroll through history. In the bustling heart of 15th century Mesoamerica, where the Aztec Empire thrived, the city of Tenochtitlan stood as a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. This wasn't just any city, it was the beating heart of an empire, a place where 200,000 people bustled about their daily lives, surrounded by floating gardens and intricate canals. Think of it as the Venice of the Americas, but with more feathers and fewer gondolas. The Aztecs, known in their own language as the Mexica, didn't just build a city, they crafted a civilization that was as sophisticated as it was brutal. Their capital, perched on an island in Lake Texcoco, was a marvel of urban planning. If you had a drone back then, you'd be snapping pictures faster than an influencer at the Eiffel Tower. But beneath the impressive architecture and vibrant marketplaces, there was a darker, more complex tapestry of culture and religion in play. Now, let's talk human sacrifice. I know, it sounds like the kind of thing you'd expect from a horror movie rather than a highly organized society. But for the Aztecs, human sacrifice was as regular as Taco Tuesday is for us, except with slightly fewer leftovers. To understand why sacrificing people was such a big deal, you need to get inside the Aztec mindset, which was all about keeping the cosmos from crashing down. They believed that their gods required nourishment to keep the universe in motion. And what was on the celestial menu? Human hearts, the juiciest offering to ensure the sun rose each day. To modern sensibilities, this sounds like the ultimate in extreme sports. But back then, it served a very serious purpose. Human sacrifice was a way to demonstrate power and control, reinforcing the political and religious order. Picture it as a high-stakes halftime show at the Super Bowl, complete with elaborate costumes and ritualistic drama, but with significantly higher stakes than a wardrobe malfunction. The Aztecs were nothing if not thorough. These sacrifices weren't random acts of violence, but meticulously planned events woven into the very fabric of their society. They had a calendar packed with religious festivals, each one requiring its own flavor of sacrifice. The most elaborate was the Festival of Toxcatl, dedicated to the god Tezcatlipoca, where a young man was chosen to impersonate the deity for a year, living in luxury before being sacrificed. Talk about a job with a killer end date. These rituals involved a cast of thousands, from priests to warriors to the unfortunate sacrifices themselves, often prisoners of war or tributes from conquered regions. It was a grim reminder of the power dynamics at play. For the Aztecs, this was a way to flex their muscles, showcasing their dominance and keeping their empire in check. It was less about bloodlust and more about maintaining cosmic order, a necessary evil to keep the gods appeased and the empire thriving. And then there's the myth-busting. The Aztecs weren't a bunch of crazed maniacs running around with knives. They were deeply religious, with a pantheon of gods as complex as any soap opera you've ever seen. Their rituals were steeped in symbolism and tradition, serving as a bridge between the mortal and divine. But let's not romanticize it too much. These were still brutal acts that cost thousands of lives. It was a harsh reality, wrapped in the trappings of faith and cultural necessity. So, while human sacrifice might make modern audiences squirm, in the Aztec world it was as essential as the sun in the sky. It was a practice born of necessity, woven into the very fabric of their existence. The Aztecs believed they were the chosen people, destined to keep the universe from falling apart, one heart at a time. That's a level of responsibility that makes our daily to-do lists look like child's play. Let's peel back the layers of Aztec society and dive into the nuts and bolts, or should I say obsidian blades, of their sacrificial rituals. These weren't slapdash affairs thrown together like a last-minute potluck. No, the Aztecs were as meticulous as a Swiss watchmaker when it came to their sacred ceremonies. And the centerpiece of these events, the grand temples, towering over the city like monumental birthday cakes with a rather grim surprise inside. At the heart of Tenochtitlan was the Templo Mayor, a massive pyramid that was the epicenter of religious life. Picture it as the Aztec equivalent of a stadium, but instead of football, the main event involved human hearts. This wasn't just any stone structure, it was a colossal feat of engineering, rising 60 meters high, a testament to the empire's architectural prowess. Building something like this took resources, lots of them. Think tons of stone, countless hours of labor, and an economy that could support such grand projects. The Aztecs weren't just about brawn, they had brains to match, organizing labor forces that could rival modern construction companies. But what about those high priests, the rock stars of the sacrificial scene? They didn't just roll out of bed and show up in their pajamas. Oh no, they were decked out in some seriously flashy attire. Imagine robes made from the finest fabrics, adorned with feathers and jewels that would make even the most extravagant runway show look modest. These priests were the ultimate influencers, wielding power not just through ritual but through their opulent appearance. And all those fancy duds weren't cheap. The Aztecs had a thriving economy, with markets bustling with goods from across the empire. Trade was the lifeblood of their society, fueling the empire's expansion and the very rituals that defined it. Now, let's slay some myths about the scale of these sacrifices. Hollywood would have you believe that every Aztec festival was a bloodbath of epic proportions, with thousands of victims lining up for their date with destiny. In reality, the scale was far more varied. Sure, there were massive events like the dedication of the Templo Mayor, where thousands were sacrificed. But not every ritual required a stadium's worth of participants. Many ceremonies involved a handful of victims, chosen with care to ensure the gods got their due without depleting the local population. Speaking of timing, let's talk calendars. The Aztecs had a knack for organization, with a calendar that could put our modern planners to shame. Their ritual calendar, known as the Tonal Pohuali, was a 260-day cycle packed with festivals and ceremonies. But, and here's the kicker, not every day was a sacrificial extravaganza. The major festivals were spaced out, occurring about every 20 days. That's right, the Aztecs weren't sacrificing left and right like a never-ending horror movie. They had a rhythm, a cadence to their religious observances that was both structured and deliberate. So why all this effort? Why build grand temples and dress priests in finery for what seems like a gruesome spectacle? It all came down to power and legitimacy. The Aztec Empire was a patchwork of conquered peoples, and maintaining control required more than just military might. These rituals were a potent symbol of the ruler's divine mandate, a way to demonstrate that they had the gods on speed dial. It was a political theatre of the highest order, reinforcing the social hierarchy and reminding everyone who held the cosmic remote control. As we peel back these layers, it's clear that Aztec human sacrifice was a complex tapestry of faith, power, and economics. It's easy to get lost in the drama of blood and ritual, but beneath it all was a society that was as sophisticated as any in history. They were builders, traders, and thinkers, crafting a world where religion and governance were inextricably linked. While the idea of human sacrifice might seem alien to us, for the Aztecs it was an essential part of their identity, a practice that made sense in a world where the gods demanded tribute to keep the universe in balance. In understanding these rituals, we see a civilization that was both brutal and beautiful, a people who believed they were holding the cosmos together with every beat of a sacrificed heart. It's a story of humanity in all its complexity, a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems. As we continue our journey through the Aztec world, let's keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember that every myth has a grain of truth waiting to be uncovered. As we unravel the layers of Aztec society further, it's clear that these sacrificial rituals served a dual purpose: cosmic maintenance and political theatre. Picture the Aztecs as the ultimate power players, using every tool at their disposal to keep their sprawling empire in check. Human sacrifice wasn't just a religious obligation, it was a strategic move on a chessboard as vast as their empire itself. At its height, the Aztec Empire wasn't just Tenochtitlan and its immediate surroundings. No, it stretched its influence over a mosaic of city-states, each with its own ruler, customs, and, let's be honest, ambitions. The Aztecs had to manage a delicate balance of power, and here's where the sacrificial rituals came in handy. Imagine inviting your not-so-friendly neighbors to witness your empire's grandeur, complete with a side of ritual sacrifice. It was less about the gore and more about the pageantry, a not-so-subtle reminder of who was boss. The Aztecs were experts at psychological warfare. By parading prisoners of war, often noble captives from rival tribes, through the streets before their final curtain call, They sent a message crystal clear as the lakes surrounding their city cross us, and you'll end up in the starring role of next season's sacrifice. These events were the pro-wrestling of their time, complete with an audience that hung on every dramatic gesture and chant. But it wasn't all male warriors and captured nobility on the sacrificial stage. Here's a plot twist. Women and even children sometimes found themselves caught in the ritualistic crossfire. While women were often associated with fertility rites, their presence in sacrifices wasn't just symbolic. It was a stark reminder of the empire's reach and control over every aspect of life. In a society that predominantly celebrated male warriors, the inclusion of women and children in these rituals highlighted the comprehensive nature of Aztec dominion. This wasn't just a man's world. It was a world where everyone played a part, willing or not. Now, let's talk economics, because nothing screams power like a well-oiled economic machine. The Aztecs, with their tribute system, essentially turned their empire into a giant ATM, with conquered regions depositing regular payments of goods, crops, and yes, people. This influx of resources was a lifeline, fueling the temples and the sacrifices that took place there. Maintaining such an empire required more than just brute force. It required an intricate web of economic dependency. And the Aztecs spun this web with the skill of a master weaver, using sacrificial ceremonies as the silk. By now, you might be wondering how the Aztecs managed to keep all these plates spinning without the whole thing crashing down. The answer lies in their knack for political maneuvering. Aztec rulers were like the ultimate CEOs, wielding religious authority as a tool of governance. By claiming divine right and demonstrating it through elaborate sacrifices, they cemented their status as intermediaries between the gods and mere mortals. It wasn't just about governance. It was about creating a narrative that reinforced their legitimacy. And speaking of narratives, let's debunk a classic Hollywood myth, the idea that the Aztecs were constantly on the brink of annihilation, driven to sacrifice in a desperate bid to stave off cosmic doom. The truth is, they were strategic, using sacrifices to project strength and unity, not just fear. The empire's stability depended on this delicate dance of power and piety, where each sacrifice was a step in a larger choreography designed to keep both gods and subjects in line. In understanding these political motivations, we see the Aztecs as more than just a civilization obsessed with death. They were astute politicians, savvy economists, and master tacticians, wielding human sacrifice as a multifaceted tool in their imperial arsenal. It's a story of power, control, and the lengths to which a society will go to maintain its grip on the world. As we continue to unravel this intricate tapestry, let's keep our eyes peeled for more surprises, because in the world of the Aztecs, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Stay tuned as we venture deeper into this fascinating tale, where every ritual and every sacrifice tells a story of an empire that was as complex as it was compelling. As we peel back the curtain on the Aztec Empire's grand spectacle of human sacrifice, let's switch gears from the cosmic stagecraft to the nitty-gritty of their financial wizardry. Because, let's face it, running an empire isn't just about keeping the gods satiated with hearts, it's also about keeping the books balanced. The Aztecs were like the ultimate CFOs, managing a complex economy that could put Wall Street to shame, all while orchestrating some of the most elaborate rituals in human history. First off, let's talk temple maintenance. The Templo Mayor wasn't just a pile of rocks stacked artfully towards the heavens. It was the showpiece of Tenochtitlan, requiring ongoing upkeep that rivaled any modern skyscraper. Imagine the sheer amount of material needed to keep this colossal structure from crumbling. Thousands of tons of stone, textiles to cover the altars, and yes, blood, lots of it. But where did all this come from? Enter the tribute system, the Aztec Empire's economic backbone. Conquered cities were like loyal subscribers, regularly paying dues in the form of goods, labour, and, occasionally, human beings. In 1519, for instance, the province of Xoconoco alone was coughing up 24,000 cloaks each year, not to mention cacao beans, jaguar pelts, and quetzal feathers. These weren't just payments, they were the lifeblood of an empire, fueling everything from priestly attire to the construction of those iconic temples. Talk about a killer subscription model. And let's not forget the labour force. Skilled workers and artisans were essentially on retainer, their talents ensuring that both temples and gods remained in tip-top shape. The Aztecs had mastered the art of resource allocation long before it became a buzzword in corporate boardrooms. Now, let's switch our focus to the participants in these rituals. You might think that the priests and warriors involved just showed up, did their thing, and went home. But oh no, they were more like the cast of a Broadway production, requiring costumes, sustenance, and a flair for the dramatic. Priests were dressed to impress, draped in robes adorned with feathers and gold, a sartorial choice that didn't come cheap. Feeding these walking fashion statements required a steady supply of food that would make any buffet blush. Maize, beans, and chilies were staples, but during festivals, the menu got a serious upgrade. We're talking turkey, venison, and even the occasional dog, served up with a side of ceremonial gravitas. And then there's the matter of the sacrificial victims themselves. While it might seem gory, these individuals were treated with a certain level of respect before their big moment. They were fed, clothed, and sometimes allowed to live in relative comfort for a time. Picture it as a particularly macabre VIP experience, complete with a one-way ticket to meet the gods. The cost of such care, however, was anything but trivial. It required a well-oiled system to ensure that each sacrifice was performed with the precision of a military operation. Now, let's dive into the economics of the ceremonies themselves. These weren't just spiritual affairs, they were social events, drawing crowds from all over the empire. Imagine the vibrant marketplaces that sprang up around the temples during these times. Merchants hawked everything from food to trinkets, creating a bustling economy that thrived on the influx of visitors. The demand for goods wasn't just about meeting basic needs. It was about the spectacle, the drama, and the opportunity to partake in something larger than life. It's like a medieval Coachella, minus the flower crowns and plus a heavy dose of ritual sacrifice. But what about the bigger economic picture? The Aztec economy was a complex organism, thriving on the exchange of goods and services across vast distances. Pochteka, or long-distance traders, were the empire's economic linchpins, journeying far and wide to bring back exotic goods like jade, obsidian, and cacao. These traders were the ancient equivalent of high-flying entrepreneurs, their ventures supporting both everyday commerce and the grand rituals that defined Aztec society. Their trade networks were so extensive that they effectively linked the empire's farthest reaches, ensuring a steady flow of resources to fuel its insatiable demand. As we explore these economic intricacies, it becomes clear that the Aztecs were more than just fierce warriors with a penchant for dramatic sacrifices. They were economic strategists, managing a vast network of resources with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. Their financial acumen was as crucial to their success as their military prowess, ensuring the empire's continued dominance in a world where power was measured not just in territory, but in the ability to maintain cosmic balance. In this dance of death and commerce, the Aztecs crafted a society that was as complex as it was captivating. Their rituals were a testament not only to their religious fervor, but to their ability to wield economic power with deft precision. While the blood-spattered altars might steal the spotlight, it's the intricate web of trade and tribute that truly underpinned the empire's might. And as we delve deeper into this fascinating tapestry, we are reminded that history is a complex interplay of belief, power, and the ever-present pursuit of order in a chaotic world. So, what does this tell us about the Aztecs? Simply put, they weren't just warriors and priests. They were master economists, savvy traders, and astute managers of human and material resources. Their empire was a living, breathing organism, fueled by a blend of fear, faith, and fiscal policy that kept the wheels turning and the hearts beating, sometimes literally. As we prepare to explore the final chapters of their story, let's keep our eyes peeled for the ways in which this ancient society continues to echo through the corridors of time, offering lessons that are as relevant today as they were in the shadow of the Templo Mayor. Stay tuned, because the Aztec saga is far from over, and the best is yet to come. Now that we've unraveled the Aztec economic playbook, and their flair for organizing human sacrifices like they were hosting the world's grimmest Oscars, it's time to tackle the big question: why does the bloody spectacle of Aztec human sacrifice still grip our imagination centuries later? Let's face it, these rituals have been sensationalized more than a celebrity divorce, with historians and Hollywood alike often painting pictures that are as dramatic as they are misleading. First, let's address the elephant, or should I say, jaguar in the room, the sheer spectacle of it all. The idea of priests descending stone steps in feathered headdresses, obsidian blades in hand, is the stuff of legends, and legends have a way of sticking around. This is human history, with the volume turned up to 11, a vivid tapestry of belief and power that refuses to fade into obscurity. But here's the kicker. While the Aztecs were indeed enthusiastic participants in their cosmic drama, the scale and frequency have often been exaggerated. Many accounts, especially those from the Spanish conquerors, were designed to paint the Aztecs as barbarians, justifying their conquest. After all, nothing says, "We come in peace," quite like a bit of moral superiority. What modern narratives often miss is the sophisticated web of meaning and necessity behind these sacrifices. They weren't just about appeasing bloodthirsty deities. They were about maintaining social order, demonstrating political might, and ensuring economic stability. It was a system where every heart offered was a cog in a much larger machine, one that kept the empire running smoothly. But let's not forget, these were real people being sacrificed, and their lives were caught in a complex dance of duty, belief, and coercion, a harsh reality that's often glossed over in favor of more romanticized tales. Let's pivot to the broader narrative of human history. The Aztecs weren't alone in their sacrificial practices, they were just particularly dramatic about it. From the Druids in Europe to the ancient Chinese, human sacrifice has been a recurring, albeit grim, motif across civilizations. It's a reminder of the lengths to which societies will go to appease the divine or maintain power. In a way, these sacrifices are the ultimate expression of human desperation and hope, an attempt to control the uncontrollable, to barter with the universe for another day of sunshine and rain. But why do these stories endure, capturing our imaginations with the tenacity of a Netflix series cliffhanger? Perhaps it's because they speak to something primal within us, a reminder of our ancestors' struggles to make sense of a chaotic world. Or maybe it's the shocking juxtaposition of brutality and beauty, the clash of civilization and savagery that keeps us coming back for more. It's a narrative that challenges our perceptions of progress and morality, making us question how far we've really come. Now, let's indulge in some hypothetical time travel and ponder what the Aztecs might think of their enduring notoriety. Would they be appalled that their spiritual practices have been reduced to mere spectacle? Or would they relish the fact that, centuries later, they still command attention? It's a tantalizing thought, imagining Aztec priests in the afterlife, bemused by their roles as historical celebrities. They might even appreciate the irony. After all, their rituals were designed to ensure their place in cosmic history, and in a twisted way, they succeeded. In conclusion, the legacy of Aztec human sacrifice is a multifaceted one, a tapestry woven with threads of power, faith, and economics. It's a story that refuses to be neatly categorized, challenging us to look beyond the sensational to understand the sophisticated society that existed beneath the feathers and blood. As we close the chapter on this exploration, let's carry forward the lessons of the Aztecs. Not just their rituals, but their resilience, their ingenuity, and their indomitable spirit. They remind us that history is never black and white, but a spectrum of human experience that continues to shape our world in unexpected ways. So next time you find yourself pondering the mysteries of the past, remember the Aztecs, who danced on the edge of the world and dared to hold the cosmos in their hands, one heart at a time. Julius Caesar wasn't always the toga-clad icon of power we picture, striding through marble halls with destiny carved into his cheekbones. No, before he was Rome's most infamous leader, he was just a kid with a lot of potential and a family tree that could have used some pruning. Born on July 12, 100 BCE, in the bustling city that was Rome, young Caesar emerged from a patrician family, basically the Roman version of old money. The genes Julia, his clan, claimed descent from Venus herself. Yes, that Venus, the goddess of love. Talk about having some divine pressure right out of the cradle. Despite these celestial connections, the Julii weren't exactly rolling in the cosmic dough. The family had seen better days, financially speaking. Caesar's father, Gaius Julius Caesar, because originality wasn't a strong suit in Roman naming, was a praetor, one of those mid-level magistrates who could boss people around but wasn't quite top dog. Still, it was enough to give young Julius a taste of the political and social circles that would later serve as his playground. Now, Let's take a moment to appreciate Caesar's family connections. His Aunt Julia was married to none other than Gaius Marius, the legendary general and 7-time consul. Picture the family dinners, Marius and his war stories on one end, and little Julius absorbing every word like a sponge. It's no surprise that military and political ambition seeped into his bones early on. Fast forward a bit, and we find young Julius at the age of 16, experiencing a personal tragedy, the death of his father. With Dad out of the picture, Julius became the head of the family. He was still a teenager, but these were Roman teenagers, practically middle-aged by our standards. In a move that would foreshadow his unrelenting ambition, he didn't just sit around mourning. Instead, he married Cornelia, the daughter of Lucius Cornelius Cinna, a prominent and powerful leader of the Populares faction. Talk about playing the political long game before graduating high school. But here's where things start to get spicy. In 75 BCE, an event occurred that would be the stuff of action movies today. Julius Caesar was captured by pirates. Yes, pirates. Those swashbuckling, eye-patch-wearing robes of the sea. Caesar was on his way to Rhodes to study oratory, because even in ancient Rome, public speaking was a hot ticket skill. These Cilician pirates thought they hit the jackpot when they nabbed him, demanding a ransom of 20 talents of silver. For context, that's about 620 kilograms of silver, or enough to buy a small island in the Mediterranean. Here's the kicker. Caesar was downright insulted by the ransom amount. Apparently he thought he was worth at least 50 talents. He insisted his captors raise their demands, and they obliged. Probably because, even as a prisoner, Caesar had a way with persuasion. While waiting for the ransom to be gathered, he lived with the pirates for 38 days. And during this time, he didn't sulk or grovel. Nope, he joined their games and exercises, even going so far as to shush them when he wanted to sleep. He also promised, rather matter-of-factly, that he would return and crucify them all. The pirates laughed it off, thinking it was a joke. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Once the ransom was paid and Caesar was released, he didn't waste time. He gathered a fleet, hunted down those very same pirates, and true to his word, had them crucified. However, in a twist of unexpected mercy, he first had their throats slit to spare them from a prolonged death. That's Caesar for you, merciful executioner. This episode was more than just a thrilling tale of sea bandits and vengeance. It was a snapshot of the audacious, relentless character that would define Caesar's rise to power. Here was a man who wouldn't just accept his fate, he'd negotiate it, redefine it, and ultimately control it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before Caesar could dominate Roman politics, he had to navigate its chaotic, cutthroat landscape. The Roman Republic was a hotbed of political factions, power struggles, and backstabbing that would make even the most dramatic soap opera look tame. Rome wasn't just a city. It was a battleground of ideologies and influence, where the Senate wielded power like a double-edged sword, and the common folk, or plebeians, were the pawns in their grand games. Caesar's early years were spent understanding this intricate dance of politics and power. He aligned himself with the Populares, the political faction that championed the cause of the common people against the senatorial elite. It was a shrewd move, considering the political climate. Rome was ripe for reform, and Caesar was positioning himself as a man of the people, all while keeping one sandal firmly planted in the aristocracy. We can't ignore the myths that swirl around Caesar, like a toga in a stiff breeze. He's often depicted as this larger-than-life figure, a born leader who rose effortlessly to power. But let's debunk that romantic notion right here. Caesar's rise was anything but smooth. It was a calculated climb full of setbacks, like running for the position of High Priest of Jupiter in his youth and losing. He faced political enemies, financial debts, and personal tragedies, yet each setback seemed to fuel his ambition rather than extinguish it. So, as we set the stage for his meteoric rise, remember this. Julius Caesar was a product of his time, a time filled with political chaos, social upheaval, and opportunities for those willing to seize them. His early life wasn't just a prelude to greatness, it was a testament to the relentless drive and cunning that would one day make him the most powerful man in Rome. And it all started with a boy who dared to imagine himself worth a king's ransom, even in the clutches of pirates. And so, Caesar, having escaped the clutches of pirates and flexed his formidable ambition, was poised to leap into the annals of history, not just as a political player, but as a military maestro. Let's talk about Gaul, that ancient region covering what we now know as France, Belgium, and parts of Switzerland and Italy. It was Julius Caesar's stage for a grand, nearly decade-long performance that would redefine Rome's borders and his own destiny. In 58 BCE, Caesar landed the gig of a lifetime proconsul of Gaul. This wasn't just any provincial governorship. It was the Roman equivalent of being handed the keys to a vast, turbulent kingdom with a side of barbarian drama. And boy, did Caesar know how to work that drama. Over the course of 8 years, he expanded Rome's territory by a staggering 640,000 square kilometers, essentially doubling its reach. Talk about a real estate mogul. Caesar's campaigns in Gaul were a masterclass in both military strategy and political chess. We're talking about a series of battles and sieges that made Game of Thrones look like a friendly game of Risk. One of his most famous victories was at the Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE, where he besieged the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix. Picture Caesar, vastly outnumbered, building a wall around the enemy's fortress, then another wall to keep reinforcements out. It was a double-decker siege sandwich that left Vercingetorix with no choice but to surrender, an act that effectively sealed Caesar's reputation as a military genius. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The Gallic Wars were brutal. According to Caesar's own accounts, because yes, our boy Julius was his own PR machine, he claimed to have killed 1 million Gauls and enslaved another 1 million. While those numbers might be a bit inflated, a Caesar specialty, there's no denying the campaigns were devastating. Entire tribes were uprooted, and the Gallic society was left in tatters. The economic impact on Rome, however, was significant. The influx of slaves and spoils from Gaul poured wealth into Rome, boosting its economy and, not so coincidentally, Caesar's political capital. It was a classic case of, to the victor go the spoils, and Caesar was all about that victor life. Back in Rome, Caesar's military conquests were like a blockbuster franchise that kept the Senate on the edge of their curule seats. His triumphs were not just victories on the battlefield, but also political gold. Each win in Gaul was a step up the ladder of power, a testament to his prowess that he leveraged to sway public opinion and court the favour of the army and common citizens alike. The Senate, meanwhile, was getting increasingly uneasy, watching as Caesar amassed power and popularity that could challenge even the staunchest of political adversaries. And here's where the rubber meets the road. Caesar's time in Gaul wasn't just about territorial expansion. It was the ultimate power play back home. The Roman military machine, fueled by conquest and booty, became Caesar's personal fan club. Soldiers adored him, not just because he lined their pockets with plunder, but because he fought alongside them, shared their hardships, and rewarded their loyalty. This wasn't some detached general barking orders from the safety of a villa. This was Julius Caesar, the man who could lead a charge and still have time to pen a bestseller about it. Let's face it, Caesar was the original influencer. His writings, Commentarii de Bello Gallico, were as much a narrative of his exploits as they were a piece of propaganda, carefully crafted to ensure that his version of events, heroic, strategic, and ruthlessly efficient, was the one that stuck. It worked too. The Romans loved a good hero story, and Caesar gave them one for the ages. Of course, the Senate wasn't thrilled about Caesar's rising star. The more he won in Gaul, the more they saw him as a threat to the fragile balance of power in Rome. The political atmosphere was as tense as one of Caesar's sieges, with factions forming and alliances shifting like sand in the wind. It was the populares, the common folk's champions, against the optimates, the conservative aristocrats clinging to their privileges. Meanwhile, Caesar was playing both sides like a maestro, his military successes giving him the leverage to maneuver through Rome's political minefield with a swagger that would make even the boldest senator blush. But this tale of military glory and political intrigue isn't just about conquest and power. It's a story of ambition unfettered, of a man who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be under his rule. Caesar wasn't just expanding Rome's territory, he was expanding his own legend. And while history often paints him as a hero or a villain, depending on who's holding the brush, the truth is far more complex. Julius Caesar was a man who understood the game better than anyone else, how to play it, how to win it, and ultimately how to change the rules to suit his vision. So, as Caesar wrapped up his business in Gaul, eyes turned towards Rome. The stage was set for the next act, where the stakes would be higher and the consequences far more personal. For Caesar, the battlefield victories in Gaul were just the beginning. The real battle, the one for Rome itself, was about to begin, and it promised to be a spectacle worthy of the ages. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting. As Caesar wrapped up business in Gaul, the allure of Rome's power corridors beckoned like an irresistible siren. His military successes had set the stage for what would become one of the most infamous gambles in history, his transition from general to dictator. But before we dive into the drama of crossing a river, let's talk about the political chessboard of 49 BCE. Rome was less of a republic and more of a shark tank, with alliances as stable as a Roman chariot on cobblestones. The Senate, led by Caesar's old frenemy Pompey, was jittery. Caesar's popularity was skyrocketing faster than a gladiator's career, and the Senate wasn't exactly thrilled about sharing the spotlight or the power. They demanded Caesar disband his army before returning to Rome. Think of it as a leave your weapons at the door policy, only the stakes were a tad higher than your average dinner party. But Caesar wasn't about to roll over. He wrote back with a proposal that Pompey also disarm, a clever move designed to paint himself as the reasonable party. Naturally, the Senate vetoed this. They were more interested in clipping Caesar's wings than in playing fair. So, what's a man to do when caught between a rock and the entire Roman Senate? Well, if you're Julius Caesar, you go big or go home. Enter the Rubicon, a modest river by geographical standards but a colossal line in the sand politically. Crossing it with an army was tantamount to declaring war on Rome itself. In January of 49 BCE, with the famous phrase, Alea iacta est, the die is cast, Caesar made his move. He and his legion crossed the river, setting off a civil war that would reshape Roman history. This wasn't just a bold maneuver, it was a calculated risk that leveraged Caesar's popularity against the Senate's authority. The crossing of the Rubicon was like a game of high-stakes poker, where Caesar went all in, betting on his ability to outmaneuver his opponents politically and militarily. It was a gamble that paid off. Caesar's advance was swift and decisive, making its way to Rome with bewildering speed. Pompey and the Senate, caught off guard, fled the city faster than you could say political upheaval. But let's pause here and reflect on the romanticized vision of Julius Caesar as a benevolent ruler. Sure, he had the flair of a rock star and the strategic mind of a chess grandmaster, but benevolence was more of a side hustle than his main gig. As Caesar consolidated power, his reforms were a mixed bag of genuine improvements and self-serving tweaks. He introduced the Julian calendar, a reform that gave us the 365-day year we still use today, with a leap year thrown in for good measure. Practical? Absolutely. But let's not ignore the fact that this also conveniently aligned the calendar with his own political agenda. Time itself was now marching to the beat of Caesar's drum. Then there were the economic reforms. Caesar tackled Rome's debt crisis, forgiving a portion of interest payments and redistributing land to veterans and the poor. Sounds like a populist dream, right? But these reforms also conveniently shored up support among the very people who could bolster his power base, the plebeians and soldiers who adored him. Not all of Caesar's strategies were about wooing the masses. His alliances, like the one with Cleopatra, were less about romance and more about political calculus. Their liaison was a strategic partnership that expanded his influence into Egypt, a key grain supplier to Rome. Cleopatra wasn't just a pretty face. She was the queen of a critical ally. Caesar's reforms weren't just about improving life in Rome, they were about strengthening his grip on power. He packed a Senate with loyalists, increasing its size from 600 to 900 members. The Senate was now a crowded house of yes-men, more a rubber stamp than a governing body. This wasn't about sharing power, it was about controlling it. Public reaction to Caesar's ascension was a mixed bag. While many hailed him as a savior who brought order to Rome's chaos, others saw him as a tyrant in disguise. The upper echelons of society, especially those who had benefited from the old status quo, were less than thrilled about Caesar's shake-up. Yet, despite the grumblings, Caesar's charisma and military track record kept him in favour with the army and the populace. He was a master of image, always the hero in his own narrative. And why not? His life was a headline-grabbing saga of victories and reforms, a drama that made the Roman populace swoon even as it made the Senate sweat. As we consider Caesar's transition from military leader to dictator, it's crucial to see both the legend and the man. He was neither wholly benevolent nor entirely villainous. Like any great historical figure, Caesar was complex. His actions a blend of ambition, reform, and ruthless pragmatism. The stage was now set for the next act of Caesar's life, a drama that would see him rise to the pinnacle of power, only to grapple with the inevitable backlash from those who feared his growing influence. The seeds of ambition had been sown, and the harvest promised to be as tumultuous as a Roman storm. So, as we delve deeper into the saga of Julius Caesar, remember this: history is rarely black and white, and Caesar's story is a testament to the shades of grey that define human ambition and legacy. Stay tuned, the best, or perhaps the worst, is yet to come. As Caesar stood on the precipice of power, he had woven a web so intricate that even the most seasoned Roman senators struggled to untangle it. His rise to eternal fame was no mere accident. It was the result of calculated risk-taking, relentless ambition, and a dash of audacious charisma. But like any good Roman drama, the story was inching toward a climax that promised betrayal, intrigue, and a hefty dose of irony. Let's slide into the slippery slope that led to Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March in 44 BCE, an event so infamous that it has its own catchphrase. By this point, Caesar had amassed titles like Dictator Perpetuo, a fancy way of saying he was Rome's head honcho for life. This didn't sit well with the Senate. Imagine a roomful of senators toggling between envy and fear, each wondering if their political necks were next on the chopping block. The conspiracy that ultimately led to Caesar's demise wasn't just about saving the Republic, it was about self-preservation. The main conspirators, Brutus, Cassius, and a gaggle of senators, were more than just political rivals. They were men driven by a cocktail of fear and pride. Brutus, the poster child for moral dilemma, was even a friend of Caesar, and possibly his illegitimate son, but let's not dive into the soap opera of Roman paternity just yet. What fueled them wasn't just the thought of preserving Rome's democracy, but protecting their own fading influence. The Senate's fear was not entirely unfounded. Caesar's reforms, while popular with the masses, effectively neutered the traditional power of the senatorial elite. He was the Oprah of Rome, doling out land and wealth to veterans and the poor, while the old guard clung to their diminishing privileges. The move to pack the Senate with his supporters was just the cherry on top of their existential crisis. And let's talk about the public spectacle of Caesar's power. When he returned to Rome in 46 BCE, he celebrated with a quadruple triumph, a series of parades so opulent they made Mardi Gras look like a backyard barbecue. He showed off spoils from Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa, all while basking in the adoration of the Roman crowd. But for every cheer from the plebeians, there was a senator gritting their teeth, feeling the symbolic dagger twist a little deeper. Now, the thing about conspiracy is that it needs secrecy, and secrecy was about as rare in Rome as a toga without a wine stain. The whispers of dissent grew louder as Caesar accepted honours that flirted dangerously with monarchy. He wore a purple toga, the colour of kings, and a laurel wreath like a crown. To many Romans, this was a red flag the size of the Colosseum. The Senate's paranoia reached fever pitch when Caesar was offered a diadem, a symbol of kingship during the Lupercalia festival. Though he refused it, the damage was done. The scent of impending autocracy was in the air, and it was pungent. The conspirators needed a plan, and what better place than the Senate itself, a den of political vipers if there ever was one. The date was set for March 1544 BCE, the Ides of March, a day that Julius Caesar would find decidedly unlucky. Ironically, he was warned by a soothsayer to beware the Ides of March, but in classic Caesar fashion, he shrugged it off. After all, when you're at the top of the world, what's a little prophecy compared to the roar of the crowd? Fast forward to the fateful day. Caesar, undeterred by warnings and perhaps feeling invincible, headed to the Senate. As he entered, the conspirators surrounded him, each with a dagger hidden in their toga. What followed was less a political assassination and more a brutal, frenzied assault. He was stabbed 23 times, a number that would haunt history. Even the great Shakespeare couldn't resist dramatizing the moment with the iconic "Et tu, brute," though the historical accuracy of those words is as murky as the Tiber. The immediate aftermath of Caesar's death was chaos. The assassins, mistakenly believing they'd be hailed as liberators, instead triggered a wave of panic and uncertainty. The streets buzzed with rumours, and the Senate met in disarray. Caesar's death left a power vacuum that sucked in all the political debris of Rome, setting the stage for further turmoil. Far from restoring the Republic, his assassination unleashed a series of civil wars more damaging than any single ruler could have been. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant, seized the opportunity to rally the people. He delivered a funeral oration that whipped the crowd into a frenzy, turning public sentiment against the assassins. His speech was a masterclass in rhetoric, playing on the populace's emotions and painting Caesar as a martyr. Antony's deft manoeuvring marked the beginning of the end for the conspirators, who suddenly found themselves less saviours and more fugitives. But here's the kicker. Caesar's death, far from being the death knell of dictatorship, became the catalyst for the rise of the Roman Empire. His heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus, would go on to consolidate power, effectively ending the Republic and establishing the imperial system. The irony is thick enough to spread on toast. The murder intended to preserve the Republic instead accelerated its demise. As we sift through the rubble of this historical earthquake, it's tempting to see Caesar's downfall as a simplistic tale of betrayal. But let's not kid ourselves. This was a complex tapestry of ambition, fear, and political maneuvering. The myth of Caesar as a tragic hero cut down in his prime is alluring, but the reality is messier and far more human. Caesar's assassination was both an end and a beginning, a dramatic finale for one of history's most compelling figures and a prelude to the empire that would follow. It was a cautionary tale about power's corrosive nature and a reminder of the precarious balance between ambition and hubris. The Ides of March was not just a turning point for Caesar, it was a pivotal moment for Rome, setting the stage for an empire that would shape the world for centuries. As we leave Caesar's story hanging in the balance, remember that history is a living, breathing narrative, one where the lines between hero and villain blur and the consequences of ambition ripple through time. Stay tuned, because the saga of Rome is far from over. And so, we find ourselves staring at the aftermath of Julius Caesar's dramatic exit from the stage of history, leaving behind a legacy as tangled as a Roman public forum at midday. The man, the myth, the toga-clad legend, his impact on Rome and beyond is as enduring as the marble slabs he once trod upon. But what exactly did Caesar leave in his wake, apart from a sea of conspiracy theories and a penchant for dramatic death scenes? First, let's talk empire, because Caesar's life and untimely demise were the prologue to Rome's imperial saga. His assassination, meant to save the Republic, ironically paved the way for its transformation into the Roman Empire. Cue dramatic irony. Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later Augustus, picked up where his predecessor left off. Augustus wasn't just any run-of-the-mill successor, he was the architect of a new Roman order. Under his reign, the Republic's remnants were swept away in favour of a system where power was centralised under a single ruler. Augustus didn't just inherit Caesar's ambition, he weaponized it, creating an empire that would stretch across 3 continents and last for centuries. Economically, Caesar's influence echoed through Rome's coffers long after the Ides of March. The wealth amassed from his Gallic campaigns. Remember those staggering 640,000 square kilometres of new territory? Fueled Rome's economic engine, laying the groundwork for the empire's prosperity. His policies of land redistribution and debt reform, though controversial, set precedents that Augustus would refine. Caesar's knack for public relations, evident in his lavish public works and games, was a template for future emperors who understood that bread and circuses were as vital to maintaining control as legions and laws. Now, let's dissect the dichotomy of Caesar's image. The man was a walking contradiction, a reformer with a dictator's ambition. On one hand, he was a champion of the people, enacting policies that favoured the plebeians and veterans. On the other hand, his consolidation of power threatened the very fabric of Roman democracy, or what passed for it. His reforms, while beneficial to many, also served to centralize authority under his command, effectively sidelining the Senate and concentrating power in his hands. Was he a hero or a tyrant? The jury's still out, and history's verdict depends largely on who's telling the tale. In the realm of myth and reality, Caesar occupies a space that few historical figures can claim. The romanticized image of Caesar as a tragic hero, betrayed by his closest allies, is compelling. After all, who can resist the drama of a man brought low by those he trusted most? But let's not forget the harsh reality. Caesar was a political animal, a master manipulator who knew how to play the game better than anyone. His assassination wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was the result of his own relentless pursuit of power that left little room for dissent. Our fascination with Caesar endures not just because of his military genius or political acumen, but because he embodies the timeless struggle between ambition and hubris, reform and tyranny. His life is a testament to the complexities of power, where the line between savior and oppressor is as thin as a Roman senator's patience. Caesar's story is a mirror reflecting our own human nature, ambitious, flawed, and forever striving for greatness, even at the cost of our own downfall. In the end, Julius Caesar's legacy is a multifaceted one. He was a man of immense talent and ambition, whose actions altered the course of history. His life and death remind us that the pursuit of power is a double-edged sword, capable of both building empires and sowing the seeds of their destruction. As we close the chapter on Caesar's saga, let's remember that history, like the Roman roads he once travelled, is paved with the triumphs and tragedies of those who dared to dream beyond the horizon. So, as you drift into dreams filled with ancient intrigues and marble corridors, remember the lessons of Julius Caesar. His story is not just a relic of the past, but a cautionary tale that echoes through the ages. It challenges us to question our own ambitions, to see beyond the myths, and to understand that the legacies we leave are shaped by the choices we make. Good night, and may your dreams be as epic as the annals of history itself. In the quiet, rural village of Smiljan, Croatia, on a stormy night in 1856, the future of electricity was born under flashes of lightning and the rumble of thunder. Enter Nikola Tesla, a man whose life story is as electrifying as the storms that heralded his arrival. From the very beginning, Tesla was a walking contradiction, brilliant yet eccentric, a man surrounded by myths and truths that often tangled like a ball of copper wire. Tesla was the fourth of 5 children, in a family that was as dynamic as the electrical currents he would later revolutionize. His father, Milutin Tesla, was a Serbian Orthodox priest and a writer, a combination that imbued little Nikola with a love for language and an ear for the poetic. On the other hand, his mother, Georgina, or Wuka, as she was affectionately called, though unschooled, was a genius of practical invention. She was known for creating labor-saving gadgets for the home, which must have sparked the first inklings of creativity in young Nikola's mind. Even as a child, Tesla was no ordinary kid. He had this peculiar habit of calculating the volume of his meals before eating them. Why? Who knows? Maybe he was just making sure his appetite didn't exceed his capacity. Or perhaps it was an early sign of his obsessive attention to detail and numbers. Either way, it was the kind of quirk that would make most parents raise an eyebrow, but not the Teslas. They seemed unfazed by Nikola's idiosyncrasies, perhaps recognizing the seeds of genius sprouting in their son. Now, let's talk about Tesla's notorious aversion to pearls. Yes, pearls. For some unfathomable reason, the sight of a pearl would send shivers down his spine. He couldn't stand them, and he refused to speak to women who wore them. Imagine the horror of showing up to a dinner party only to be ignored by Tesla, simply because you were wearing your grandmother's pearl necklace. It's one of those delightful oddities that make him such a captivating figure. An electrical wizard who was powerless against the allure of a shiny, round gemstone. As Tesla grew, so did his fascination with the mysteries of the world around him. He was blessed, and sometimes cursed, with a photographic memory. This remarkable ability allowed him to vividly recall books, images, and complex designs with absurd precision. But, as with any superpower, it had its drawbacks. His mind was often so flooded with ideas that he had trouble sorting them out. Nonetheless, it was this very trait that would later enable him to visualize his inventions in perfect detail before ever setting pen to paper or tool to workbench. Fast forward to Tesla's university years, and you find a young man whose brilliance was both a blessing and a burden. Tesla attended the Austrian Polytechnic in Graz, where he quickly set himself apart. During a lecture on electrical engineering, he famously corrected his professor, pointing out the inefficiencies in the design of a direct current motor. His professor was dumbfounded and probably a bit annoyed, and Tesla's classmates were no doubt torn between admiration and the desire to throttle the know-it-all in the room. But Tesla's insight was just the beginning. Despite his academic prowess, Tesla's university career was anything but smooth sailing. He developed a notorious habit of working through the night, driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Imagine pulling all-nighters not because of looming deadlines or youthful procrastination, but because your brain just wouldn't let you sleep until you'd explored every nook and cranny of a topic. That was Tesla, a man whose mind was as relentless as it was brilliant. But Tesla's intense dedication came at a cost. His health began to suffer due to his rigorous schedule, and financial troubles added another layer of stress. His scholarship was cut off, likely because he had become too much of a financial burden, and he eventually left the university without a degree. It's a reminder that even geniuses face setbacks, and sometimes the path to greatness is paved with more than a few academic hiccups. Despite these challenges, Tesla's early life set the stage for his future innovations. His experiences in Graz, combined with his innate curiosity and his mother's mechanical ingenuity, would eventually lead him to the heart of the electrical revolution. While he couldn't stand pearls and had a penchant for calculating the volume of his meals, these quirks were merely the colourful threads in the tapestry of a life that would illuminate the world, literally. As we wrap up this chapter of Tesla's life, it's clear that the young inventor was already a force to be reckoned with. The groundwork had been laid for a career that would challenge the very foundations of science and technology. So, hold on to your hats or your pearls if you dare, as we continue to unravel the enigma that is Nikola Tesla, a man whose life was as charged with brilliance as it was with eccentricity. As Tesla's story unfurls, we find him aboard a ship bound for the United States in 1884, clutching a letter of recommendation that would soon lead him into a whirlwind of sparks and ambitions. Now, it's not every day you uproot your life and cross the Atlantic, but Tesla wasn't your everyday kind of guy. He was about to step into the chaos of late 19th century America with nothing but 4 cents in his pocket, a few articles of clothing, and a head full of ideas that could light up the world. Upon arriving in New York City, Tesla set his sights on the Edison Machine Works, where his letter from Charles Batchelor, one of Thomas Edison's close associates, promised to be his golden ticket. Batchelor wrote, "I know 2 great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man." With a reference like that, how could Edison resist? Well, resist he did not, but welcome with open arms? That's another story. Edison and Tesla were like oil and water, a mix destined for one heck of an explosion. Edison, the practical American inventor, was the king of direct current DC power. He saw electricity as a product, a commodity to be packaged and sold like newspapers from a street corner. Tesla, the visionary European, dreamed in alternating current, AC, seeing electricity as a boundless force of nature, ready to be harnessed and set free. Their relationship was a classic clash of cultures, styles, and ultimately currents. At first, Edison put Tesla to work improving his DC generators. Tesla, ambitious and eager to prove himself, reportedly agreed to a $50,000 bonus if he successfully overhauled the machines. Fast forward months of relentless toil and surprise, Tesla delivered. Yet, when it was time to collect, Edison allegedly laughed it off, saying, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor. Ouch!" Talk about a shocking revelation. Tesla, feeling betrayed and undervalued, parted ways with Edison. It was the beginning of the legendary War of Currents, a battle for the future of electricity. On one side, Edison championed DC, claiming it was safer and more reliable. On the other, Tesla, now backed by businessman George Westinghouse, pushed for AC, which could travel longer distances with less power loss. Westinghouse saw the potential in Tesla's ideas and was willing to gamble on them, and gamble he did, investing $60,000 in cash and stock, plus royalties on each horsepower of AC sold. Now, let's talk numbers. Edison's DC required power stations every mile or so. Imagine the infrastructure costs. Tesla's AC, on the other hand, could stretch for miles with minimal loss of power. A fact that didn't just fry Edison's circuits, it threatened his entire empire. So, what did Edison do? He played dirty. Real dirty. In a smear campaign worthy of a modern political race, Edison staged public demonstrations, electrocuting animals to show the dangers of AC. He even stooped to endorsing the electric chair, powered by AC, for the execution of criminals. Talk about a shocking PR move. But the public wasn't swayed for long. The economic practicality and efficiency of AC power won out. And by the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Tesla and Westinghouse had lit up the fairgrounds with AC, dazzling visitors with a vision of an electrified future. Now, while Tesla and Westinghouse were busy illuminating the world, Tesla's mind never stopped buzzing with ideas, some brilliant, others, well, more like electrical daydreams. One of his most famous? Wireless power transmission. Picture this, sending electricity through the air like radio waves, powering homes and factories without a single wire. Sound futuristic? Absolutely. Impractical? Well, yes, at least with the technology of the time. Tesla envisioned a world where energy was free and accessible to all. But as you might guess, the industrial titans of the day weren't too keen on the idea of giving away power for free. Tesla's grand plans for wireless transmission, epitomized by his Wardenclyffe Tower, were ultimately shelved due to a lack of funding. His backer, J.P. Morgan, famously quipped, "If anyone can draw on the power, where do we put the meter?" Despite such setbacks, Tesla's reputation as an eccentric genius only grew. Stories of his quirks became the stuff of legend. His fear of germs, his penchant for working from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. without a break, and his insistence on walking precisely 8 miles every day, all painted a picture of a man who lived life according to his own peculiar rules. But beneath the oddities was a man driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to change the world. Tesla's ideas, while sometimes impractical, were often ahead of their time. His exploration of wireless technology, for instance, laid the groundwork for modern wireless communication, proving that even his most fantastical notions had kernels of genius. In the end, Tesla was less a mad scientist and more a misunderstood visionary whose legacy continues to influence the way we live, work, and communicate today. As we leave Tesla standing at the dawn of the 20th century, the air around him crackles with potential. He's a man poised on the brink of greatness and obscurity, his name destined to flicker through history like the very electricity he sought to master. Stay tuned, because the story of Nikola Tesla is far from over, and the next chapter promises more sparks than a downed power line in a thunderstorm. Just as Tesla stood on the brink of the 20th century, his mind was alight with ideas, like a carnival of innovation, but even a brain as brilliant as his couldn't juggle dreams and dollars simultaneously. Enter the late 1890s and early 1900s, a time when Tesla's genius was matched only by his knack for financial calamity. If there's a lesson here, it's that being an inventor doesn't necessarily mean being a savvy businessman. First up, let's talk radio waves, a technology that was buzzing with potential and ripe for exploration. Tesla was already experimenting with wireless communication by 1893, conducting demonstrations that were, frankly, ahead of their time. He was transmitting signals over short distances, envisioning a world connected by invisible threads of electromagnetic magic. But here's the kicker. While Tesla was busy dreaming big, a young Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi was busy making history. Marconi, with his dogged determination and perhaps a bit of opportunism, managed to transmit the first transatlantic radio signal in 1901, and he did it using some of Tesla's patented ideas. Ouch, that's got to sting. Now, you might think, surely Tesla had recourse? Well, not quite. The US Patent Office initially sided with Marconi, despite Tesla's earlier patents. Whether it was Marconi's charm, connections, or plain old business acumen, he nabbed the glory and the lucrative patents, while Tesla was left standing in the shadows, muttering to himself about the injustice of it all. This was a classic case of right idea, wrong time and place, and it serves as a stark reminder that the world of innovation isn't just about brilliance, it's also about who gets there first and who gets noticed. Segueing from radio waves to the infamous Wardenclyffe Tower, we find Tesla reaching for the stars, or at least trying to broadcast electricity to them. The Wardenclyffe project was Tesla's grand vision. 87-foot tower on Long Island, designed to wirelessly transmit free energy to the world. Imagine it as the Eiffel Tower's eccentric American cousin. Only instead of tourists snapping selfies, it was meant to send electricity zipping through the air. But like so many great plans, it hit a wall called financial reality. Tesla's backer, the banking titan J.P. Morgan, initially forked over $150,000, about $4.5 million in today's dollars. But even big dreams need bigger wallets. As costs ballooned, Morgan grew cold feet, especially when you realized Tesla's vision included giving away electricity. The phrase, "Where do we put the meter?" wasn't just a snappy comeback, it was a business strategy. Without a profit model, the tower's fate was sealed, and by 1906, work stalled completely. It stood unfinished, a skeletal monument to what might have been, casting long shadows over Tesla's career and finances. Despite these setbacks, Tesla's social life was, well, as peculiar as you'd expect. While most inventors might network at fancy soirees, Tesla preferred the company of pigeons. Yes, pigeons. He was a regular sight in Bryant Park, feeding his feathered friends with a devotion that bordered on the eccentric. Some might say this was a lonely man's attempt to connect with nature. Others might see it as a grounding ritual amidst the chaos of his electric pursuits. Either way, it's hard not to admire a guy who can find solace in the cooing of pigeons when the world of human investors feels like a flock of vultures. But let's not pigeonhole Tesla just yet. Despite his quirks, he was a fixture in New York's high society. He rubbed elbows with the likes of Mark Twain, who, by the way, was a huge fan of Tesla's work. Imagine the inventor and the author, two giants of their time, debating the future over cigars and brandy. It's the kind of intellectual bromance that modern tech titans can only dream of. As Tesla navigated these peak years, he was both a man of his time and ahead of it, a peculiar blend of genius and oddity. The world saw him as an enigmatic wizard, conjuring visions of a future yet to come. But behind the curtain, he was a man grappling with the harsh realities of economics and recognition. His story is a reminder that genius can illuminate the world, but it can also cast long shadows. As we leave Tesla in this chapter, his legacy is poised between triumph and tragedy, a testament to both his brilliance and the unforgiving nature of the age of invention. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the electrifying life of Nikola Tesla, because if you think you've heard all the shocks, you'd better hold on to your hat. As we dive deeper into the twilight of Tesla's life, we find a man who, despite his towering intellect, was increasingly out of step with the world around him. Picture this. It's the early 20th century, and while the world is buzzing with the excitement of new technologies, Tesla is grappling with the harsh realities of isolation and financial despair. The same mind that once dazzled the world with visions of a future electrified is now caught in a web of eccentricity and economic woes. Tesla's later years were marked by a series of bizarre inventions and peculiar habits that only added to his aura of mystery. Take, for instance, the infamous earthquake machine. Officially known as the mechanical oscillator, this contraption was intended to generate electricity through mechanical resonance. In 1898, Tesla was rumored to have nearly shaken his New York City laboratory and the surrounding neighborhood to its foundations during an experiment. He reportedly had to smash the machine with a sledgehammer to stop the vibrations. While the tale has grown into legend, it underscores Tesla's relentless pursuit of innovation, even if the result sometimes bordered on the chaotic. Despite his financial struggles, Tesla's connections to wealthy patrons remained a lifeline. He had a knack for charming the elite, securing funds from industrial magnates like John Jacob Astor, who invested $100,000, roughly $3 million today, in Tesla's wireless lighting and energy transmission ventures. But even this substantial backing couldn't stave off the inevitable. By the 1920s, Tesla's financial situation had become precarious, as his grandiose plans repeatedly outpaced the practical realities of funding and technology. Tesla's fascination with numbers and symbolism also played a significant role in his life. He was particularly obsessed with the number 3, a fixation that bordered on the compulsive. Before entering a building, he would walk around it 3 times, a ritual that spoke to his belief in numerology and its mystical significance. This quirk, while endearing to some, further isolated him from a world that increasingly saw him as a relic of a bygone era rather than the visionary he truly was. His peculiarities didn't end there. Tesla was a man of strict routines and habits, perhaps a coping mechanism for a mind that was constantly in overdrive. He would dine alone at exactly 8:20 p.m., often at the Waldorf Astoria or the New Yorker Hotel, where he lived out his final years. Each meal was consumed with precision, and he would demand that the table settings be arranged just so. To the waitstaff, he seemed like a man trapped in his own world, his thoughts as elusive as the wireless energy he once dreamed of transmitting across the globe. Tesla's later inventions were a mixed bag of the inspired and the impractical. He envisioned a particle beam weapon, dubbed the death ray by the press, which he claimed could bring about world peace by making war obsolete. While this idea sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel, Tesla was deadly serious. In 1934 he pitched the concept to several governments, but despite his fervour, the technology was never realised and the plans were never fully developed. Amidst these technological dreams, Tesla's financial situation continued to deteriorate. He was often forced to rely on the kindness of friends and former colleagues who recognised the genius behind the eccentricity. One such benefactor was George Westinghouse, who, despite their past business entanglements, ensured Tesla received a modest pension in his later years. Westinghouse's gesture was a testament to the deep respect he held for Tesla, even as the world seemed to move on without him. The Great Depression of the 1930s only compounded Tesla's woes, as the economic turmoil left little room for speculative ventures or grandiose visions. Yet, through it all, Tesla remained undeterred, continuing to file patents and propose ideas that were decades ahead of their time. His mind was a fountain of innovation, even if the world wasn't quite ready to drink from it. In the end, Tesla's story is one of brilliance and isolation, a man whose genius was both his greatest asset and his greatest burden. As the years wore on, he became increasingly reclusive, retreating into the company of his beloved pigeons. He was said to have developed a particular fondness for one white pigeon, claiming that he loved her as he would a human being. It might sound odd, but perhaps this connection offered him a sense of companionship that the human world, with its harsh judgments and financial pressures, could not. As we leave Tesla in this chapter, it's clear that his life was a tapestry of contradictions, a blend of genius and eccentricity, success and struggle. His legacy is one of both triumph and tragedy, a testament to the power of innovation and the challenges that come with it. But remember, the story of Nikola Tesla is far from over. There's more to uncover, more to understand about this enigmatic figure who dared to dream beyond the limits of his time. So stay tuned, because the final chapter promises more intrigue and insight into the life of a man who truly was ahead of his time. And so, as the curtain fell on the vibrant yet tumultuous life of Nikola Tesla, it was January 7, 1943, when he was found lifeless in room 3027 of the New Yorker Hotel. The man whose mind had once danced with electricity and ideas that defied the imagination had quietly exited the stage, leaving behind a world that was only beginning to understand the magnitude of his contributions. At the time of his death, Tesla was 86 years old, and the world he left was both brighter and dimmer without him, brighter for his inventions, dimmer for the absence of his visionary spark. Tesla's passing went relatively unnoticed by the general public, a stark contrast to the luminary he was in his prime. Yet those who knew the weight of his work understood that a giant had fallen. His belongings were swiftly claimed by the Office of Alien Property, a move steeped in the tensions of World War II and the fear of his technologies falling into the wrong hands. Among his possessions, the mysterious death ray plans were rumoured to exist, adding fuel to the fire of Tesla's legendary status. However, much of what was seized were personal notes and correspondence, a treasure trove for historians and technologists alike, but hardly the arsenal of a mad inventor. Tesla's legacy, however, was far from static. In a delightful twist of historical irony, the man who had been overshadowed by Marconi in life was vindicated posthumously. In 1943, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed its earlier decision, acknowledging Tesla's patents as the foundation for radio technology. It was a bittersweet victory, coming too late for Tesla to bask in its glory, but it cemented his place in history as the true father of radio. Take that, Marconi! Moving beyond his lifetime, the rediscovery of Tesla's work has been nothing short of electrifying. His ideas, once considered too far-fetched, have become the building blocks of modern technology. Wireless energy transmission, though not yet realized in the way Tesla envisioned, has evolved into the backbone of wireless communication and Wi-Fi, the invisible threads that keep our world connected. And let's not forget the Tesla coil, that iconic piece of technology that not only inspired future generations of engineers, but also became a favorite in science fairs and steampunk aesthetics. Tesla's influence reaches into the realms of pop culture, where his life and work have been romanticized, dramatized, and occasionally fictionalized. From David Bowie's portrayal of Tesla in The Prestige to the electric car company bearing his name, Tesla's legacy has found new life in the 21st century. He's become a symbol of the misunderstood genius, the archetype of the inventor who dreams beyond the constraints of his time. Yet, in this romanticization, it's crucial to separate the man from the myth. Tesla was no wizard, but a scientist driven by curiosity and an unyielding belief in the possibilities of science, a belief that often clashed with the economic realities of his era. The enduring allure of Tesla's persona lies in this duality, the tragic genius and the visionary ahead of his time. He was a man who never quite fit the mold, constantly at odds with the commercial world that demanded results and profits. His mind was a wellspring of ideas, some practical, others whimsical, yet all driven by a profound desire to unlock the secrets of the universe. It's this relentless pursuit of knowledge, regardless of personal cost, that continues to inspire generations of inventors and dreamers. But let's not sugarcoat it. Tesla's life was as much a cautionary tale as it was a celebration of innovation. His struggles with finances, the ruthless competition of the industrial age, and his inability to monetize his inventions serve as stark reminders of the harsh realities faced by inventors. It's a world where brilliance alone isn't enough. One must also navigate the murky waters of business and politics. In Tesla's case, his refusal to compromise on his ideals often left him on the fringes, a lone wolf in a pack-driven society. Yet, despite these challenges, Tesla's legacy endures. His work laid the groundwork for alternating current, the very lifeblood of modern electrical infrastructure. Without Tesla's contributions, our world would be a dimmer place, quite literally. His vision of a future powered by technology was not just a dream, but a roadmap that continues to guide us today. In the grand tapestry of history, Nikola Tesla stands as a beacon of what it means to push the boundaries of human understanding. His life, while fraught with challenges, was a testament to the power of imagination and the courage to pursue one's vision no matter the odds. As we reflect on his legacy, we are reminded that the true measure of genius is not just in the inventions left behind, but in the inspiration they ignite in others. So, as we conclude our journey through the enigmatic life of Nikola Tesla, let's leave with a spark of his spirit, a reminder to dream big, question everything, and never shy away from the unknown. After all, as Tesla himself believed, the future is always within our reach, waiting to be illuminated by those brave enough to grasp it. In the bustling, sun-drenched markets of ancient Egypt, you might have caught a whiff of something truly divine, quite literally so. Perfumes in this ancient civilization weren't just about masking the stench of daily toil or impressing your date at the royal banquet. They were the olfactory equivalent of a Swiss army knife, used for everything from spiritual rituals to medicine and, yes, even seduction. Cleopatra's legendary charm? Let's just say it wasn't all her sparkling personality. Her strategic use of scents played its part too. The Egyptians didn't just dabble in the art of fragrance, they practically invented it. You see, these folks weren't just throwing together a few rose petals and calling it a day. Nope, they were blending complex concoctions with ingredients like myrrh, frankincense, and cinnamon. And before you ask, yes, that's the same myrrh and frankincense that would later feature in a certain well-known nativity scene. These ingredients were not just aromatic, but were believed to have divine and therapeutic properties. In fact, priests used them in religious ceremonies to communicate with the gods, as if Hathor herself would lean in for a sniff and grant her blessings. Now, let's talk economics because, let's face it, nothing moves history like cold, hard cash, or in this case, whatever shiny objects were equivalent in value. Perfume was a luxury item, with costs that could make even a pharaoh pause. The ingredients were sourced from far-flung corners of the ancient world, involving trade routes that would make your morning commute look like a walk in the park. Picture caravans trudging miles through the desert, ships navigating treacherous seas, all to bring a few ounces of these precious substances to Egyptian shores. The costs were staggering. Imagine trading a good quality slave, which would set you back about 20 Deben, that's Egyptian currency folks, for just a small quantity of perfume. It's no wonder that only the elite could afford to smell like heaven. This wasn't just about personal indulgence, though. The perfume trade was an economic powerhouse, with Egypt at its fragrant epicenter. Trade routes zigzagged across Africa, Asia, and Europe, turning the Nile into a bustling highway of commerce. Perfumes were exchanged like ancient stock options, with prices fluctuating based on availability and demand. And demand was high. After all, who wouldn't want to bottle up a little bit of the gods' favour? Of course, with great power comes great mythology. Cleopatra, for example, is often portrayed as the ultimate seductress, and while her political savvy and intellect were undoubtedly magnetic, her use of perfumes added a layer of mystique. Her so-called perfume sales were legendary. According to Plutarch, she would sail to meet Mark Antony with her ship's sails soaked in perfume, so that the scent would announce her arrival long before she stepped onto the shore. A little over the top, perhaps, but who's to argue with results? Mark Antony was certainly captivated, yet let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. The reality was often less glamorous. The production of these perfumes was labor-intensive and time-consuming. Workers would spend days grinding spices, extracting oils, and mixing them with fat or oil bases. It was a science and an art, requiring precision and patience. And while the end product was a luxury, the process was anything but luxurious for those down in the trenches of production. So, was Cleopatra's allure solely due to her strategic use of fragrance? Not entirely. But her savvy use of these ancient aromatic tools certainly didn't hurt. In a world where the divine scent was as powerful as any political alliance, Cleopatra knew how to wield her perfume wand to charm and conquer. In essence, perfume in ancient Egypt was a multi-sensory experience that transcended mere olfactory delight. It was about connection, whether to the divine, to power, or to each other. And while the romanticized tales are delightful, the reality is a testament to the ingenuity and complexity of ancient Egyptian culture. Their legacy lingers on the winds of history, reminding us that sometimes the power of a good scent is more than just skin deep. As we leave the sun-baked shores of Egypt behind, let's sail to the cradle of civilization itself, ancient Mesopotamia. This land between the Tigris and Euphrates was more than just fertile ground for crops. It was a fragrant playground where scent signaled status and wealth. Picture the bustling bazaars of Babylon, where the air was thick with the aroma of exotic spices and oils. You see, in Mesopotamia, smelling good was as important as looking good, if not more so. It wasn't just about personal hygiene, though, let's be honest. A little scent goes a long way in a world without deodorant. This ancient hub of trade and culture was home to some of the earliest known perfumers, who were part alchemist, part artist. They concocted their aromatic brews in small workshops, blending ingredients like cedarwood, myrtle, and cypress. These weren't just for personal use. They were offerings to the gods who, according to Mesopotamian belief, had a nose for earthly perfumes. Temples would burn fragrant resins and woods to entice divine favor, hoping the sweet-smelling smoke would reach the heavens and curry favor with deities like Ishtar. Now, let's talk cold, hard economics. In Mesopotamia, perfume wasn't just a luxury, it was a commodity. The Sumerians, who kick-started this whole civilization thing around 4500 BCE, traded extensively in aromatic substances. These were high-stakes deals involving traders who traversed dangerous routes to bring back valuable ingredients like frankincense from Arabia or spices from the Indus Valley. The value of these goods was astronomical, rivaling that of gold or silver. When you think about it, these ancient entrepreneurs were basically the Jeff Bezos of their time, with the scent industry being the original, Amazon minus the prime shipping, of course. But as much as we love a good myth, let's not pretend every Mesopotamian was walking around smelling like a divine bouquet. The reality? Most of the common folk would have been lucky to catch a whiff of these luxury items. Perfumes were primarily the domain of the elite, the rulers, and the priests, those who could afford to literally burn their wealth in the name of religion and status. Meanwhile, the average citizen likely relied on more practical methods of odor control, clay baths, and the occasional splash of water. Now, let's fast forward to the sunny shores of ancient Greece, where the love affair with perfume reached dizzying heights. The Greeks took what the Egyptians and Mesopotamians started and turned it into an art form, with a hefty dose of philosophy thrown in for good measure. In Athens, the scent wasn't just about personal allure, it was a social and political statement. Men and women of means would anoint themselves with fragrant oils, a practice so popular that it spawned an entire industry of perfumers and apothecaries. Greek society was one where appearances mattered a lot. A well-placed dab of perfume could elevate one's social standing, much like the right Instagram filter today. And let's not forget the political implications. Statesmen would use scents to project power and confidence, much like modern politicians with their power suits and carefully curated public personas. But before we get too carried away with tales of Grecian glamour, let's bust a few myths, starting with the goddess of love herself, Aphrodite. Legend has it that her divine aroma could charm even the most hardened of hearts. Yet, the idea of a goddess whose mere scent could launch 1,000 ships is, let's admit, a tad hyperbolic. While the allure of divine perfumes is captivating, the truth is that these tales were likely embellished to emphasize the goddess's power and allure. In reality, the Greeks were more practical about their olfactory obsessions. They understood that scent could influence mood and perception, which is why they used it strategically in everything from seduction to warfare. Yes, you heard that right. Greek soldiers would perfume their armor, believing that a sweet-smelling warrior was a more intimidating opponent. Talk about killing them softly with scent. Economically, the perfume trade was a booming business in Greece. City-states like Corinth became centers of production, with artisans crafting complex perfumes that were exported across the Mediterranean. This wasn't just about luxury. It was a significant part of the economy, with perfumers enjoying a status akin to today's tech moguls. They were innovators, constantly experimenting with new ingredients and techniques to create the next big scent sensation. Despite the romantic notion of Aphrodite's divine perfumes, the truth is that the average Greek's experience with fragrance was far more grounded. Perfumes were a costly indulgence, often reserved for special occasions like weddings or religious ceremonies, and while the elite could afford to drench themselves in the finest oils, the common folk might only experience such luxuries through the wafting aromas of public festivals or temple offerings. In essence, the history of scent in ancient Greece is a tale of contrasts between myth and reality, luxury and necessity, divinity and humanity. While the legends of divine perfumes are enchanting, the real story is one of innovation, trade, and the power of scent to shape society. As we continue our journey through history's fragrant corridors, remember this. Behind every myth is a kernel of truth, wrapped in layers of human ingenuity and ambition. So, let's keep sniffing out the past, one fragrant tale at a time. And speaking of sniffing out the past, let's stick our noses into the fragrant absurdity that was Rome during its imperial heyday. Rome wasn't just a city, it was an empire that stretched its scented fingers across continents. When it came to perfumes, Rome was the place where opulence met extravagance, and then promptly eloped with absurdity. We're talking about a society where, if you didn't smell like a garden in full bloom, you might as well have been wearing a toga made of burlap. Let's start with the emperors, those masters of excess. Nero, for instance, wasn't just an emperor, he was the original influencer of olfactory opulence. This guy reportedly spent 100,000 sestertii, a sum that could fund an entire legion of soldiers, on a single public banquet, purely on scent. Imagine burning a small fortune just to ensure that every guest would leave with the scent of roses lingering in their nostrils. For context, a Roman legionary earned about 900 sestertii a year. So, Nero could have either thrown one party or paid 1,000 soldiers for over a year. Choices, right? Nero's passion for perfumes was symptomatic of Rome's broader cultural dynamics. Perfume wasn't just about smelling nice. It was a statement of power, a tangible expression of Rome's wealth and influence. In fact, the Roman upper class was so obsessed with fragrance that they would have perfumes imported from as far as Arabia and India. These scents travelled thousands of miles, enduring treacherous seas and bandit-infested trade routes just to end up in a Roman bathhouse. But let's not pretend it was all roses and lilies. The reality of this fragrant quest was gritty. The logistics of importing and producing perfumes were a nightmare. The cost of these luxurious scents was often passed down to the lower classes, who saw their taxes rise while their social betters doused themselves in exotic aromas. It was economic trickle-up in its most aromatic form. Now, let's get back to Nero, whose penchant for excess set the standard for subsequent emperors. This was the man who, according to Suetonius, had roses shipped from Egypt to carpet the floors of his dining halls. Yes, the same Egypt that was practically the perfume capital of the ancient world. Nero didn't just want to smell like a god, he wanted his guests to walk on the very essence of divine luxury. Talk about putting your best foot forward. But let's pause for a moment and consider the bigger picture. Why did Nero and his imperial cronies indulge in such olfactory opulence? The answer lies in the societal norms and power dynamics of Rome. In a world where political power was as volatile as a bottle of nitroglycerin, projecting an image of divine favor and untouchable wealth was crucial. Fragrance became a tool of statecraft, a way to impress, intimidate, and inspire. Of course, this wasn't just an imperial phenomenon. The Roman elite were equally enthusiastic about their perfumes. Both men and women would bathe in scented oils, anoint their hair, and even perfume their pets. Yes, you heard that right. Roman dogs were often treated to a splash of the finest scents, probably to spare the noses of their pampered owners. But let's not forget the myth-busting. While Roman society liked to portray itself as a bastion of fragrant refinement, the reality was often less glamorous. Perfume, for many, was a luxury beyond reach, its production a laborious process involving the extraction of oils through methods that would make a modern chemist wince. The average Roman citizen, sweating under the Mediterranean sun, was likely more familiar with the scent of olive oil than the rare essences of myrrh or saffron. Yet, the allure of perfumes was undeniable. They were woven into the very fabric of Roman life, from religious ceremonies to feasting halls. In a society that revered the senses, scent was a potent symbol of status and sophistication. The Romans might have strutted through their marble villas with the grace of gods, but beneath the fragrant facade lay a complex web of economic, social, and political forces. So, while Nero's floral follies might seem absurd to us, they were part of a broader cultural tapestry that defined Rome's golden era. As we leave behind the grandeur and excess of Roman fragrance, let's keep our noses tuned to the winds of history. There's more to uncover, more myths to bust, and more truths to reveal. For in the scent of the past, we find not just the essence of humanity's journey, but the stories that continue to shape our world. As we pack our metaphorical bags and leave the fragrant excess of Rome behind, let's glide into a new era where the air was filled with the scent of scholarly innovation, the Islamic Golden Age. This wasn't just a time of intellectual flourishing, it was a veritable renaissance for perfumes and scents, thanks to pioneering figures like Avicenna, the polymath who could probably put today's multitaskers to shame. The Islamic Golden Age, spanning roughly from the 8th to the 14th century, was a period where science, culture, and trade mingled like a well-balanced perfume blend. And speaking of blends, let's dive into the alchemical world of fragrance, where distillation was both an art and a science. Before you yawn at the mention of chemistry, consider this. Without these early experiments, your favorite eau de parfum might not exist today. Enter Avicenna, or Ibn Sina if you're feeling authentic. This Persian physician and philosopher wasn't content with just revolutionizing medicine. He decided to pivot into the world of scents too. Avicenna's claim to fragrant fame? Perfecting the distillation process to extract essential oils, a technique that allowed for the production of more refined and potent perfumes. Imagine trying to make French haute cuisine without butter distillation was that pivotal for perfumery. Avicenna's advancements weren't just about smelling nice, though. They were tied to the era's broader scientific endeavors. The Islamic Golden Age was a time when scholars were poring over texts, translating Greek, Roman, and Indian manuscripts, and innovating upon them like the original tech startup founders. In this vibrant intellectual marketplace, perfumes were more than luxury. They were a testament to human ingenuity and the pursuit of knowledge. Now, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the camel in the room, the myth of the exotics East. It's a romantic notion that the Islamic world was an otherworldly paradise of spices and scents, but reality, as always, is more nuanced. These perfumes were born out of rigorous scientific methods and trade networks that spanned continents. not just the whimsical dreams of sultans lounging in opulent palaces. The Islamic world was a hub of commerce, with trade routes stretching from the Mediterranean to India and beyond, making it the Amazon of its day, without the algorithm, but with plenty of spice. The economic backbone of this fragrant empire was nothing short of impressive. Spices and aromatic substances were traded like gold, with prices fluctuating based on availability and demand. A single shipment of frankincense from southern Arabia could fetch enough to fund a small army, and let's not forget the logistics involved. Caravans trudged across deserts, braving bandits and the relentless sun, just to ensure that the elite in Baghdad or Cordoba could dab a little luxury behind their ears. And speaking of elite indulgence, let's not overlook the Abbasid Caliphate, whose capital, Baghdad, was a fragrant epicenter. The city was a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and yes, aromas. Here, the caliphs indulged in perfumes, not just as an olfactory delight, but as a demonstration of their power and sophistication. Imagine a court where the air was thick with the scent of rosewater, a symbol of wealth and divine favor, wafting through the grand halls. It sounds like a scene from a storybook, but the cost and effort to maintain such luxury were as real as the sand beneath the camel's hoof. Yet, for all its romantic allure, the reality was that the average citizen in Baghdad wasn't bathing in rose petals. Perfumes were predominantly a luxury for the wealthy, a symbol of status rather than a daily staple. The common folk might catch a whiff of these exotic scents during public festivals or religious ceremonies, but for most, the fragrant life was out of reach, a reminder of the social hierarchies that defined the era. But let's not get too bogged down in class divides. The innovation didn't stop with Avicenna. The Islamic Golden Age saw the development of new techniques in distillation and the discovery of numerous aromatic substances. Scholars like Al-Kindi, who penned a treatise on perfumes and their distillation, were at the forefront of this olfactory revolution. They didn't see perfumes as mere luxury items, but as part of a broader scientific inquiry into chemistry and medicine. This was a time when the boundaries between disciplines were as fluid as the perfumes they created. In a world where philosophy, medicine, and chemistry coexisted, perfumes were more than just a pleasant aroma. They were a testament to human curiosity and creativity. The Islamic scholars of this era laid the groundwork for modern perfumery, with their meticulous methods and scientific rigor paving the way for future generations. So, as we savor the complexity of the Islamic Golden Age, let's remember that behind the myths of exoticism lies a rich tapestry of scientific advancement and cultural exchange. These perfumes were more than just scents. They were a reflection of a society that valued knowledge and innovation above all else. As we continue our journey through the fragrant corridors of history, let's keep our noses and our minds open to the stories that have shaped our world. There's more to explore, more myths to debunk, and more truths to uncover as we venture further into the aromatic past. Just as the Islamic Golden Age gave us a whiff of what the future could hold in the world of scent, medieval Europe was about to take us on an unexpected olfactory detour. Fasten your seatbelts, or should I say hold your noses, because we're diving into a time when the Black Death didn't just decimate populations, it spurred a veritable boom in perfume usage. Yes, you heard that right. In a period where survival was as uncertain as a cat's loyalty, people turned to fragrances as a form of counterattack against an invisible enemy. Let's paint the scene. It's the 14th century, and the Black Death is sweeping across Europe with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. With mortality rates soaring to a staggering 60% in some regions, people were desperate for any form of protection. Into the concept of miasma, the belief that disease was spread through bad air. In a pre-germ theory world, this idea made as much sense as any, leading to some truly questionable hygiene practices. Perfumes, with their sweet, overpowering scents, were thought to counteract these deadly vapors. If you couldn't see the germs, at least you could try not to smell them, right? This fear of miasma turned the use of perfumes from a luxury into a perceived necessity. Physicians of the time, those medieval medical influencers, recommended fragrant herbs and spices to purify the air, a strategy that was about as effective as trying to stop a tidal wave with a handkerchief. But desperation breeds innovation, or at least increased consumption. People began carrying pomanders, small, perforated containers filled with aromatic substances, as a sort of medieval air freshener. These were the original pocket protectors, warding off disease one sniff at a time. But let's not sugarcoat it, the reality was grim. The plague didn't care how many rose petals you sprinkled around your dwelling. Yet, the economic impact of this newfound demand was significant. The perfume trade, which had seen steady growth, found itself at the heart of a booming market. Merchants and apothecaries cashed in on the hysteria, with prices for fragrant oils and spices skyrocketing. In some cases, a pound of saffron could cost as much as a horse. Imagine that, choosing between a gourmet spice and a reliable mode of transportation. The increased demand for perfumes also had political and social ramifications. The Church, always keen to maintain moral order, was suspicious of this fragrant frenzy. They saw the use of perfumes as both a potential sin of vanity and a challenge to the idea that only divine intervention could save humanity from the plague. But for the average person, the allure of perfumes was hard to resist. They were a small luxury, a fragrant shield against the chaos of a world that seemed to be falling apart. Now, let's take a step back and consider what this perfume mania says about human nature. In the face of an existential threat, people turned to what they knew, what they could control. Perfumes became a talisman, a way to impose order on an unpredictable world. It's a testament to our enduring belief in the power of scent, a belief that transcends cultures and eras. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and we see a Europe that's not just recovering from the plague, but flourishing. This was a period of rebirth not just in art and science, but in the world of fragrance. Perfumes, once a luxury for the elite, began to trickle down to the burgeoning middle class. The invention of the alcohol-based eau de cologne in the 18th century democratized scent, making it more accessible to the masses. Suddenly, everyone could indulge in a splash of olfactory elegance. This democratization of scent had economic implications as well. The rise of perfumery in cities like Grasse, France, turned the industry into a powerhouse. Grasse, with its ideal climate for growing fragrant flowers, became the epicenter of perfume production, a status it holds to this day. The city was like Silicon Valley for scent, attracting innovators and artisans who experimented with new techniques and ingredients. By the late 18th century, the perfume industry was a major economic force, with fortunes built on the backs of roses, jasmine, and lavender. Yet, let's not overlook the darker side of this fragrant boom. The production of perfumes was labor-intensive and often exploitative. Workers toiled long hours in fields and factories, their labor essential yet undervalued. The story of scent is not just one of luxury and indulgence, it's also a story of human toil and sacrifice. As we bridge the gap between past and present, it's worth pondering what we've truly learned from our fragrant history. Modern perfumery owes much to the innovations and cultural shifts of the past. Today's perfumes are a blend of art and science, a testament to human creativity and our enduring love of scent. But the question remains, have we really moved beyond the myths and misconceptions of history? In a world where brands sell us dreams in a bottle, are we still chasing the same fragrant fantasies as our ancestors? The legacy of historical fragrances is both enduring and complex. It's a reminder that scent, for all its ephemeral nature, has the power to shape cultures and economies. From Cleopatra's seductive sails to the plague's aromatic defences, perfumes have been a part of our journey, a reflection of our hopes and fears. In the end, the story of scent is a story of humanity itself, a blend of romance and reality, myth and truth, captured in every fragrant note that wafts through time. So, as you spritz on your favourite perfume or light that scented candle, remember the journey it took to reach you. Behind every bottle lies a history steeped in innovation, perseverance, and a touch of the absurd. And who knows? Maybe one day, historians will look back at our olfactory obsessions and see them as a reflection of our own times, a fragrant testament to the enduring power of scent in the human story. In medieval times, folks had a sleep schedule that would make even the most dedicated night owl do a double take. Picture this: you hit the hay, catch a few Z's, then wake up in the dead of night for a couple of hours before diving back into dreamland. This wasn't some bizarre sleep experiment gone wrong, it was the norm, a concept known as segmented sleep. The Middle Ages had all sorts of peculiar habits, but chopping up your sleep into first sleep and second sleep was a real tour de force of nocturnal quirkiness. Let's break it down. The medieval night was as dark as a politician's promise, with daylight hours limited and candles burning a hole in your pocket, literally. With no Netflix to binge or TikTok to doomscroll, folks got their kicks in more, shall we say, traditional ways. The absence of artificial light meant people went to bed shortly after sunset, but snoozing straight through the night? Not so fast. First sleep typically kicked off around nightfall and lasted till about midnight. Then came an intermission, 2 hours or so of wakefulness, followed by a second sleep until dawn. Now, why all this sleep theatre, you ask? For starters, it was partly due to the natural human sleep cycle. Modern experiments suggest that when people live without artificial light, they naturally revert to a segmented sleep pattern. Those medieval folks might not have had the science to back it up, but they were onto something. And let's not forget the religious angle. The witching hour of wakefulness was prime time for prayer, meditation, or the occasional bout of night work, if you catch my drift. Indeed, medieval texts like the Canterbury Tales hint at these midnight diversions, suggesting that a little nocturnal activity was par for the course. But was it all peaceful prayers and meditative reflections? Hardly. The medieval night was teeming with mystery and mischief. With the veil between worlds considered thinnest, it was a time for spirits, supernatural beings, and, let's face it, a few folks up to no good. The dark hours were an opportunity for clandestine meetings and hushed conversations, sometimes the kind that could get you in trouble with the Inquisition if you weren't careful. And then there's the romantic myth of the medieval peasant, blissfully drifting through a simpler life. While the image of a rosy-cheeked farmer nestled in a straw bed is quaint, reality begs to differ. Sleep was a precious commodity, dictated by the back-breaking rhythm of agricultural life. The sun was your alarm clock, and long winter nights were the only reprieve from a relentless cycle of toil. Historical records, like those of the French historian Roger Ekirch, point out that segmented sleep was referenced in diaries and court records alike. It was so common that the term first sleep even appears in documents, like it was legit enough to be written down. But don't let that trick you into thinking everyone leisurely rolled over for a second round of slumber. The realities of medieval life were more demanding than a medieval lord's tax collector. In any case, the segmented sleep pattern was woven into the very fabric of medieval life. It was as much a part of the daily grind as ploughing fields or brewing ale. And speaking of ale, it wasn't uncommon for folks to enjoy a little nightcap during their wakeful interlude. After all, what better way to pass the time than with a warm mug of mead and a chat with whoever else was burning the midnight oil? So, next time you're tossing and turning, remember that your medieval ancestors were likely wide awake too, perhaps pondering the same existential questions, or simply wondering why sheep never seemed to run out of wool to count. Whether it was due to the whims of the natural world or the constraints of a candlelit economy, segmented sleep was a curious chapter in the sleep saga of the Middle Ages. And while we might laugh at the eccentricity of it all, one thing's for sure: those medieval folks knew how to make the most of a long night. When it comes to medieval sleep, the class divide was as wide as a moat around a paranoid baron's castle. Peasants and nobles weren't just separated by land and power. Their sleep routines were worlds apart too. Imagine you're a peasant, crammed into a one-room hut with your entire family, livestock included. Privacy? Forget it. Comfort? Only if you find straw particularly cushiony. The average peasant family lived in a house that was barely 15 feet by 15 feet. That's about the size of a modern studio apartment, but without the luxury of a functioning bathroom or kitchen. And the smell? Well, let's just say, Outer Barnyard wasn't the best seller. Sleep for peasants was dictated by the brute force of agricultural life. Sunrise was the start gun, and sunset was the finish line. But here's a plot twist. Those long winter nights weren't just a time for hibernation. They were an opportunity to catch up on sleep debt, something we modern folks know all too well. The agrarian calendar set the pace, with seasonal changes flipping the sleep script. Winter might have offered longer slumbers, but summer had peasants up at the crack of dawn, tending to fields like their lives depended on it, because they did. It was a never-ending loop of ploughing, planting, and harvesting with no snooze button in sight. On the flip side, the noble class was living it up in their drafty stone castles. Sure, the heating left something to be desired, and the echoes could drive you batty, but when it came to sleep arrangements, they had the upper hand. Nobles enjoyed separate sleeping chambers, sometimes even with curtains for that extra touch of privacy. Canopy beds draped in luxurious fabrics were the medieval equivalent of a 5-star hotel suite. The average noble's bed was about 6 feet long and 4 feet wide, a veritable ocean of sleep compared to a peasant's straw pallet. And let's not ignore the feather mattresses and woolen blankets, because why shouldn't your sleep be as plush as your lifestyle? Seasonal changes played a role here too. Nobles might have had the luxury of sleeping in, but even they couldn't escape the demands of their estates. Winter months might have seen them nestled comfortably beside a roaring fire, while summer meant overseeing the harvest with a keen eye and a sharp tongue. The agrarian calendar was the great equalizer, dictating the rhythms of life for everyone, noble or peasant, though the nobles would argue they did it with more style. Now, let's dispel a few myths. The romantic image of a medieval lord sipping wine in a grand hall before retiring to a peaceful night under a canopy bed is a bit misleading. Yes, they had the comforts, but they were also plagued by the same medieval inconveniences, pests, draughts, and the ever-present threat of intrigue. Sleep might have been more comfortable, but it wasn't necessarily more peaceful. And speaking of peace, the medieval night was anything but. With no street lights to illuminate the path, the darkness was a playground for both the divine and the dubious. The absence of artificial light meant the night was a canvas painted with the fears and folklore of the times. Superstitions ran rampant, with tales of spirits and spectres guaranteed to keep you up at night. One can only imagine the conversations that arose during those wakeful intermissions, as people pondered whether the bump in the night was the wind or something more sinister. For peasants, these interruptions weren't just moments of existential dread, they were practical. The night watch was a real thing, especially when your livestock represented your livelihood. A good portion of that wakeful time was spent ensuring that your cows didn't wander off, or that wolves weren't making a meal of your sheep. Nobles, on the other hand, might have used the time to catch up on correspondence or, in some cases, engage in a little late-night politicking. After all, power never sleeps. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, sleep was but one thread, albeit a crucial one. It was influenced by factors as varied as the seasons, social status, and the ever-present demands of the land. While the myth of a peaceful medieval night persists, the reality was a complex dance of necessity and adaptation. As we dig deeper into the peculiar slumber habits of the past, it becomes clear that whether sleeping on straw or silk, everyone was just trying to catch a little rest in a world that never quite seemed to stop. Let's dive deeper into the medieval bedroom, or whatever passed for one back then. If you think medieval people were tossing and turning on a fluffy mattress, think again. The reality was more Goldilocks and the 3 uncomfortable beds than anything remotely plush. Yes, straw mattresses were a thing, but they weren't the cozy nests of hay you might picture. In fact, calling them mattresses feels like a stretch. These beds were often just straw stuffed into a sack. A hasty attempt to soften the unforgiving wooden bed frames, or, for many peasants, the cold, hard ground. And while straw was the medieval equivalent of a sleep innovation, it came with its own set of nightmares. Enter the notorious bed bugs, those tiny vampires of the night. These critters were a constant companion to anyone unlucky enough to rest their head on a straw-filled sack. They'd easily hop from one sleeper to another in the communal sleeping arrangements that were all too common in the Middle Ages. Bedbugs weren't picky. From the lowliest peasant to the mightiest lord, everyone was fair game. But hey, at least they were a great leveller in a society obsessed with hierarchy. Now, speaking of those communal sleeping arrangements, let's dispel another myth, the idea that medieval people cherished their privacy. Privacy was about as common as a unicorn sighting. Families, sometimes consisting of up to 10 people, would share a single sleeping space. The medieval motto might as well have been the more, the merrier, but also the stuffier. This wasn't just about family bonding, it was a practical necessity. In those one-room huts, body heat was an essential source of warmth during the biting winter months. If you've ever been in a packed subway car, you have a sense of the ambience. The upper classes had a bit more room to stretch out, but even they weren't immune to the communal sleeping trend. Servants often slept in the same room as their masters, ready to attend to their needs at any hour. This might sound like a royal pain, but it was actually considered a privilege, an opportunity for the lower classes to overhear the latest court gossip or political maneuverings. Think of it as the medieval version of eavesdropping on the corporate water cooler. So why were people so willing to give up their personal space? The answer lies in the social dynamics of the time. In an era where survival was a team sport, individualism took a back seat to communal living. Sharing resources, including your sleeping space, was a way of life. In fact, the word roommate would have been redundant. Everyone was a roommate, whether you liked it or not. But let's not paint too bleak a picture. There was a romantic side to these arrangements, literally. The close quarters meant that marriages were often forged in the fires of proximity. You might not have chosen your spouse, but you certainly got to know them well. And while this might sound like a recipe for disaster, it was a practical approach to building family ties and ensuring survival. After all, when you're sharing a straw mattress, you have to find common ground, or at least agree on the least lumpy side. Now, onto the nobles and their so-called luxury. The upper crust might have had separate chambers, but let's not kid ourselves into thinking they were the epitome of comfort. Those grand canopy beds were less about opulence and more about necessity. Drafty castles meant that warmth was hard to come by, and those heavy curtains served as insulation against the cold as much as a privacy screen. Feather mattresses were indeed a step up from straw, but they also came with their own set of issues. Feathers have a pesky habit of escaping their casings, leading to a night of itchy discomfort rather than restful slumber. And if you think the nobles were immune to pests, think again. Rats and other vermin were frequent guests, undeterred by the grandeur of the surroundings. In fact, the wealth of a household often attracted more pests, drawn by the abundance of food scraps and the warm hiding spots provided by those luxurious tapestries. So, a noble's bed might have been more comfortable, but it certainly wasn't more peaceful. But let's not romanticize the peasant's plight either. While they might have been used to the rougher conditions, the constant struggle for warmth and comfort was, quite literally, a daily grind. The economic context of the time meant that any comfort was a bonus, not a given. A good harvest might allow for a thicker layer of straw or a new woolen blanket, but a bad one could mean shivering through the night with nothing but your neighbour's body heat to keep you warm. The bottom line is this. Medieval sleeping arrangements were a mixed bag, full of compromises and creative solutions born of necessity. They reveal a society deeply connected to the natural world and each other, for better or worse. The communal living arrangements underscore a collective approach to survival, while the nobles' attempts at comfort highlight the ever-present divide between the classes. As we peel back the layers of history, it becomes clear that the myths of medieval sleep are as varied as the people who lived them. Behind the romantic veneer lies a gritty reality, one that speaks to the resilience of human nature. From straw mattresses to communal sleeping, these arrangements were a testament to ingenuity in the face of hardship. They remind us that, whether in a peasant's hut or a lord's chamber, everyone was just trying to get a good night's sleep in a world that was anything but restful. Now, just when you thought medieval folks had enough on their plate with segmented sleep and straw mattresses, let's dive into the quirky world of medieval sleep aids. Yes, before you could pop a melatonin gummy or download a sleep app, people had to get creative, sometimes wildly so. And trust me, these practices make counting sheep look like child's play. First up, we have the herbal remedies. Forget lavender spray. Medieval people had an entire apothecary's worth of sleep-inducing concoctions. Valerian root, for instance, was the Ambien of the Middle Ages. This potent plant was mixed into teas and tinctures to help calm the mind and soothe the nerves. And if you think chamomile is a modern hipster tea, think again. It was a medieval staple, brewed to help the anxious drift off into a peaceful slumber. Even poppy seeds made an appearance, though let's just say their use was a bit more potent than your average bagel topping. But why stop at plants when you can have a more, shall we say, hands-on approach? Welcome to the world of bizarre superstitions. One of my personal favourites involves hanging animal bones over your bed. Yes, you heard that right. Some medieval folks believed that placing a mole's foot or a bear's tooth above their sleeping space would ward off nightmares and evil spirits. It's unclear how effective these macabre mobiles were, but they certainly added a touch of gothic chic to the medieval bedroom. And speaking of nightmares, let's talk about how medieval society interpreted these nocturnal terrors. Today, we might blame a bad dream on stress, or that late-night snack, but back then, a nightmare was a different beast altogether. Literally. The term nightmare itself comes from the Old English word mare, a mythological demon believed to sit on people's chests as they slept, causing fear and suffocation. Imagine waking up and blaming your restless night on a supernatural squatter. It's no wonder folks were keen on their protective charms and rituals. But nightmares weren't the only nighttime oddity. Sleepwalking also had its own set of interpretations. In a world steeped in superstition, a sleepwalker wasn't just someone who wandered around in their pajamas. No, they were often thought to be possessed by spirits or, worse, bewitched. This led to all sorts of creative cures, from tying people to their beds to ringing bells to wake them from their trance. Not quite the gentle nudge we might offer today. The economic context of these practices is as fascinating as the practices themselves. For the average medieval peasant, a good night's sleep was invaluable, literally. A bad harvest, a sick animal, or a family squabble could all spell disaster, so anything that promised a more restful night was worth trying. The apothecaries and herbalists who concocted these remedies weren't just early pharmacists. They were essential to the community's survival, offering hope and comfort in the form of dried leaves and roots. And let's not forget the political angle. In the courtly world of nobles, sleep, or the lack of it, could be a matter of statecraft. A ruler plagued by insomnia might make a poor decision or be seen as weak, so ensuring a good night's rest was more than just a personal concern. The powerful would employ astrologers and dream interpreters to decipher the meaning behind their nocturnal visions, hoping for insights into the future or guidance in state matters. Sleep, it seems, was as much a political tool as a personal necessity. In the medieval tapestry, sleep aids and interpretations were woven with threads of superstition, practicality, and desperation. While we might chuckle at the idea of hanging bones for a better night's rest, it's a sharp reminder of the lengths people will go to for a touch of comfort in a world full of uncertainty. Whether brewed in a pot or hung from a bedpost, these practices reveal a society grappling with the unknown, ever inventive in its quest for peace and protection. And so, as we drift further into the landscape of medieval sleep, it's evident that every remedy, every superstition tells a story, a narrative of hope, fear, and the eternal human quest for a good night's sleep. Whether it was the soothing scent of valerian or the eerie presence of a mole's foot, these practices were more than just sleep aids. They were lifelines, connecting the medieval mind to a world where the line between the natural and supernatural was as blurred as a dream upon waking. As we draw the curtains on our deep dive into medieval sleep, it's essential to ask, what echoes of these eccentric habits still ripple through our modern lives? Well, buckle up, because the legacy of segmented sleep and other medieval quirks might surprise you more than a mole's foot charm. First, let's talk segmented sleep, the two-act slumber performance that medieval folks perfected. Believe it or not, this ancient pattern is making a bit of a comeback. Studies suggest that our natural circadian rhythms might actually prefer this biphasic sleep cycle, a revelation that's prompted some night owls to embrace the midnight interlude once more. It's like the renaissance of rest minus the chamber pot. While modern society runs on a tight schedule dictated by the 9-to-5 workday, a throwback to industrialization, there's a growing movement to reclaim the night. Think of it as the nocturnal version of slow food. Those 2 hours of medieval wakefulness were when creativity flowed, problems were pondered, and sometimes less wholesome activities took place. Today, the same period might be used for meditation, writing, or, let's face it, another episode of your favorite binge-worthy series. Of course, not everything from medieval sleep culture has aged like a fine wine. Case in point, the communal sleeping arrangements. While sharing a studio apartment might feel medieval, the concept of having livestock as roommates has, thankfully, fallen out of fashion. Instead, we've traded sheep for smartphones, which keep us company at night with their glowing screens and endless notifications. An insomnia-inducing twist on the theme. And what about those medieval sleep aids? Herbal remedies like valerian and chamomile remain popular, albeit jazzed up in modern packaging. The apothecary's charm lives on in the aisles of health food stores, where ancient roots and flowers promise a natural night's sleep. However, the more macabre practices, like hanging animal bones, have rightfully been relegated to the annals of history. While we ditch the bear's tooth, the quest for a peaceful slumber continues to inspire inventive solutions, from white noise machines to weighted blankets. Politically speaking, The power of sleep is no less significant today. Just as medieval rulers relied on astrologers to interpret their dreams, modern leaders consult sleep scientists to ensure they're not making crucial decisions on a deficit. The notion that a well-rested leader is a better leader transcends time. After all, nobody wants a cranky king or president pushing buttons with bags under their eyes. Economically, the medieval sleep story highlights how necessity shapes habits. Back then, the agrarian calendar dictated sleep, and today, economic pressures still play a role. The gig economy has resurrected a form of segmented sleep for some, with work schedules as varied as the phases of the moon. Freelancers and shift workers often rest in shifts, juggling deadlines and sleep with the dexterity of a jester's juggling act. Now, let's debunk a few myths that have stubbornly stuck around. The romanticized vision of the medieval peasant, blissfully unaware of the hustle and bustle, is as fantastical as dragons. Reality check: life was tough, and sleep was a commodity, not a guarantee. Similarly, the idealized image of the noble snuggled under a canopy bed often glosses over the drafty reality and nightly skirmishes with vermin. In truth, the medieval night was a battleground, whether against the elements, societal expectations, or the occasional rat. In the grand tapestry of history, medieval sleep practices remind us of the timeless human quest for rest and rejuvenation. As we navigate our own nightly routines, it's worth considering how far we've come and what we've left behind. From the ritualistic charm of herbal remedies to the evolving understanding of our biological clocks, the story of sleep is one of adaptation and resilience. So, whether you're an early bird, a night owl, or somewhere in between, take a moment to appreciate the rich history of sleep. It's a tale woven with threads of necessity, culture, and a dash of medieval mystique. In a world that never quite stops, the pursuit of a good night's sleep remains a universal quest, as vital today as it was in the shadowy halls of medieval castles and humble peasant huts. Sleep may be an ancient art, but its evolution is a testament to our enduring ingenuity and adaptability. And with that, let's tuck in this historical exploration with a cozy conclusion. Remember, the next time you toss and turn or wake up in the wee hours, you're not alone. You're in good company with centuries of sleepers who, in their own quirky ways, were just trying to find a little peace in the chaos. Sweet dreams, fellow night wanderers.